photographers, there's the age-old battle, isn't there? RAW versus JPEG. And I've seen so many tutorials and conversations about which is better and why. I'm here to tell you, a lot of that is kind of bullshit, because if you don't really understand what you're doing the photographs for in the first place, it doesn't really matter what you shoot it on. So I'm going to run through some of my processes from over the years, from how I started using JPEG to how I ended up using RAW, and how sometimes now I still just shoot JPEG. Okay, so strap yourselves in, let's get into it. Hello, welcome back to the newest, latest adventure encounter, the Burkitt encounter. Today, it's still about 150 degrees in here, and I'm still on the verge of ringing Bob Geldof to come and give me some aid, because it's just horrendous. I've had the fan on for the last 10 minutes trying to cool me down, but as soon as I switched it off, it's like back to Sahara temperatures. And in reality, it's only about 23 degrees. So for those of you in Europe laughing at me now, you know, in England, we're used to probably 12, 18 max, so it's 4 degrees warmer than normal, so it's absolutely killing us really. But again, I'll suffer through for the love of the podcast. So right, today's topic, RAW versus JPEG. And I can remember when I first started photography, 2005, and I started off with a little Fuji Fine Pixel description, bridge camera, you know, no interchangeable lens, limited functions, and it only shot JPEG. So I learned everything on JPEG for the first year or so, but it wouldn't have really mattered because I had no fucking idea what I was doing anyway. So to add in a RAW file of any description would have only complicated things for me at that point. So I just needed to see pictures, take pictures, learn how to focus, learn how to do all that kind of stuff before I even started thinking about dynamic range and being able to pull things out, push things in the edit. So initially I started with JPEG, and what I did was I learned what I wanted to do and got the camera to give as much as I could. And then, as you've seen on other videos that I've done, learn an edit process to match it to bring the best out of the JPEG. So I didn't really start myself shooting JPEG until probably 2010 or 11, at which point I'd got 4 or 5 years experience, literally just shooting JPEGs for clients, for myself, for everything, and been happy with the results. And I can remember around 2008-9, a couple of people who were coming on my tutorial sessions. They would come to my studio for photography tutorials, and they were saying, "Oh, why aren't you shooting RAW? It's this, that." And I'm like, "What are you doing with it?" And they were like, so what they were doing with it is they were just wanging sliders around until they thought it looked brilliant on their uncollaborated screen, not even looking at the histogram, thinking that that was making amazing pictures because they had all this function. And some of them as well were using it as a backup for when they fucked up in camera, they could fix it. You know, this is a real bad way to work, isn't it? In fact, around that time, late 2000s, I used to hear that a lot. "Oh, I'll fix it in shop. Oh, I'll shop it later." Used to drive me nuts. Absolutely, still drives me nuts now when I hear it. Photoshop should be an aid, not a magic wand. Anyway, I digress. So I've had the RAW versus JPEG thing for a long time, and for me, the RAW file is great because it does allow you not just a certain amount of error, it also allows you a bit of creativity, so you can make different choices in post after. Sometimes you'll have heard me say that when I shoot, I always slightly underexpose because you can bring back most of that. But if you overexpose, whether you're RAW or JPEG, if you really overexpose, you're stuck with it. So natively, I shoot underexposed JPEG and RAW. And always found, until I started working with RAW a lot, that I had enough space in JPEGs, depending on what I was shooting, to bring it back, to get it to where I wanted it to be. And I always put it down to control. And by control, what I mean is, if you're in a situation where you're controlling all the elements of the photo shoot, an example would be, I might be in the studio here. I've got no wind, rain, or sun to worry about. I'm controlling everything myself, either with a fan or with the lights. I'm literally controlling everything. So my approach to that photo shoot shouldn't be, well, hang on a minute, I'll shoot in RAW so I can fix everything later. It should be, because I'm controlling everything, I can get everything I want in camera there and then, with a few minor tweaks in Photoshop afterwards, because I know that the camera's not quite giving me exactly what I want. It can't. It's incapable. So that's what I started to do in practice. So if I'm in a scenario, wherever it is, whether it's a studio, wherever, where I'm controlling everything, I've really no need to shoot in RAW, because my shoot and edit workflow allows me to get the best out of that JPEG anyway. And adding in RAW workflow, even though mine's minimal, into that is just another thing to have to do. So while you hear all the stories about RAW's better, RAW's bigger, it's not. There's no physical size difference between the two unless you've told your camera to do that. You've got more dynamic range. You can change the colour balance more easily, things like that with a RAW file, but generally speaking, they're the same file. A RAW file is just the unprocessed JPEG that you've shot. And if you know what you're doing in terms of photo shoot, setting up your lights, setting up your models, or your actors, or your wedding, whatever it is, you're controlling all those elements. Why would you give yourself another thing to have to do by editing a RAW file, unless there's something specific you want to bring out, generally speaking mid-tones or a little bit more shadow lifting. But generally speaking, you can do that with the edit process I'll show you today anyway. So I'm always been a bit, yes, JPEGs are limited, but RAW files are immense in what they can do, particularly now. And cameras are much better now with ISO and all that stuff. So creatively, if you're controlling all the elements in a studio, let's say I'm doing a portrait in a studio, I've got the lights on, controlling the colour, controlling the amount of light, I'm controlling the atmosphere and controlling everything. Why do I need to shoot in RAW? To get the best out of that situation. I learned to set up properly, set everything up nicely, slightly underexposed, so I can bring things back at the edit. So I thought, to prove to you today that in some scenarios RAW is no more use to you than JPEG, I'm going to go back to 2006 and work my way up through a few of my pictures and show you that I shot JPEGs and how I dealt with them from a shoot and edit perspective. Alright, so let's get into that now. So the first one we're going to look at is with a fabulous model called Lloyd, and worked with Lloyd a couple of times over the years, but this is going back to 2006. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. And I think from memory this will have been shot on a 10 or a 20D. I think 10D. Shall we have a look and see if it was a 10 or a 20D? Let's have a look at the file info. Look at that, I didn't even change the name. Bloody hell, must have bought it off somebody called John Roberts. How bad's that? Hey John, if you're still there. So you can see Canon 10D 35. I mentioned on the last podcast the 35mm lens thing. Oof, we'll not get into that here. 1/8 of the second f10, ISO 100, and that's what I got. And that's just one big softbox off to the right. Probably, I don't know, from memory I probably had my white balance set to daylight, because when I was using Canon and Bowen stuff. In fact, these weren't Bowen's lights, these will have been the German ones that I had at the time, whose name escapes me. But they were around daylight, so I would have shot to daylight. But you can see there's a little bit of erroneous red and yellow and a bit of green on the right hand side here. So for those of you who have not seen this tutorial before, when you're looking at a histogram to see where your picture is, off to the left here you've got shadows, off to the right here you've got highlights, and when you're shooting on a white background, on the right hand side you should have no peaks of colour. They should just be nice and grey. There might be some very fine thin bits of colour, hair, makeup, but generally speaking that big lump of grey there, that graph, should come all the way to the end. So you can see on here I've got some red, green and yellow. Now remember, we're shooting JPEG, not RAW. So in a RAW file you could go in, change your colour balance, bing, do it, back out. But we can't do that here. So what do I do? Well, a tip I learned from Guy Gowan years ago was to use photo filter. And what we do is, where we've got a misbalance of colour, we look at the colour wheel, we put back in the all the opposite colour that you don't want, and it takes it away in theory. Sometimes it's a bit fiddly, but if we go on the layers palette and go to photo filter like that and drop down, we want to get rid of red first, so red was the biggest colour. The opposite of red is cyan or blue. We just click on that and get rid of all that, and then just click in the box there where it says 1 and just use the arrow up and down key to gradually, and you can see that red's disappearing. Can you see that? Almost gone. Got a little bit of green come up there, so I'm just going to go back 1%. So 20% of cyan got rid of that red. Now you can see that on the histogram. Pretty easy to see. Remember what I said before about it should all be grey here. If you've got little Arrhenius colours at the top and a little bit of the edge, don't worry about that. That's skin tone. Sometimes they're clothes, but what you're looking for is no mad colours over here to the right hand side. We're slightly underexposed. It's telling us that there, because if we were fully exposed to the max, all the detail on the left would be over to the left, and all the detail on the right here would be over to the right. We're going to fix that next. But straight off the bat, I know, because even it happens to this day on the R6, when I colour calibrate daylight to match daylight bulbs, it never is. It's always off a bit. So the first thing I always check is white balance. So it's no surprise to me, looking back, that Lloyd was a bit off colour because the camera and the lights didn't quite match. None of that grey card shit, none of that test shooting shit. Just match it up and go a little bit of fixing post. Now, it took me a minute or two to show you this. It would have took me 10 seconds to do that without showing you. If I just switch off that eye, look on and off, you can see massive difference. Look at the picture. See that? And you don't often notice that until you've done the edit. So that's the first thing done. Next thing, I just want to pinch the exposure a little bit. So to do that, I'm going to use levels. And again, I'm going to go into the palette here, the little black and white circle, come up and pick levels. I do it this way because it gives us a new layer. We're not destructing the original layer, non-destructive editing all the way. And you can see how the histogram here matches the histogram here. And all we're going to do is fine tune each end to get a perfect exposure. Now what I often do, because I like a lot of contrast in my pictures, is I'll pinch the shadows past the point where I should. It's actually there. If I click in the box which says 0 and go 1, 2%, that's probably enough. But I'm going to go to 5 because I like contrast. And then again, over on the right hand side, we don't do any wanging about of sliders here. The Lance Burkitt Encounter does not advocate for wanging of sliders. We're all about precision. So this one, if we grab the slider, look, you can see we can overexpose it. If I bring it over here out of the way. See that? Seen loads of pictures like that where the skin's burnt out to hell. So all we're going to do, instead of doing that, is we're going to click in where it says 255 there. I'm going to hold down Shift key and page down, and I'm going to 10% it across till I get to the beginning of that information there. And I'm just going to go on 2 more percent. Alright, so you can see now, if I switch that off, how we've got more contrast. Quite flat there, nicely shot, but cameras are shit. They don't really give you what you want until you've fixed it, or finished it rather. We switched it on and off, you can see a little bit more. But the only concern for me is, as I'm noticing this as I'm getting older and wiser and more experienced, the tie is now burnt out completely, and it wasn't before. See that? So all I'm going to do is in there, I'm going to press B on the keyboard to get a paintbrush tool. I'm going to take all the hardness off the brush so the edges of the brush are soft, and I'm just going to brush back in some of that detail like that. And it's not made a massive difference. It's probably because it's a silver tie, it's a little overexposed anyway. But see now, I just brushed out by clicking in the mask and using black in the palette. If I make a mistake and I want to put it back, I can just change that by hitting X on the keyboard, and it brushes it back on. See that? On and off. So that's the kind of only tweak I'm going to do there, like that. Alright, happy with that now. That's my edit. For all intents and purposes, done. Alright. JPEG, 19 years old. I'm not 19 years old. The JPEG it there is a 19-year-old JPEG off a 10D. A great camera. Soft 35-80mm lens. Beginner stuff. I'd only just started. Got fuck all money. It's further proof that you don't have to have everything in the world to be a successful photographer. The only thing I'm going to do now with this is sharpen it a little bit, because I know because of the kit I was using, it's not very sharp. I want it to be a little sharper. So to do that, I'm going to use a process again that I learned off Guy Gowan. Kudos to Guy. That I've used for 20 years, which is a great way of fine-tuning and only sharpening the bits you want to be sharp. So at this point, you can't put any sharpness on these adjustment layers. They're kind of a bit in the way. So all we do is Control, Shift, and E, and that'll flatten them. So the effects of them are still there, but they're kind of hidden in the background now. We're back down to one background layer. So how do I sharpen then? Okay, so we're going to make a mask. We're going to make a mask using the red channel, inverted, and that's because it's going to make us a mask where we only apply the sharpening to certain points. So I'll just show you what to do. You've got to have your channels open. Click on the red channel, click it down to new, right? So it's made a copy. Control and I inverts it. You can see now it's inverted. All I want to do is really sharpen the white bits, not the black bits. But it's a little bit, particularly the eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a bit more to that by going up to image adjustment levels and just adding some real big levels to that mask. Yeah, and if I drag that across like that and drag that across, you can see I'm going really mad here. But what I know is when I apply this mask, it will only affect the white areas. All right. So I'm going to load that mask in now by pressing Control on the keyboard. Can you see how it highlights the pointer? Click in there. You can see it's now loaded that into the picture. I'm going to go to channels and click on RGB just so I can see the picture. And I'm going to turn off the extras. Turn off extras. I can't see the marching ants. They're still there, just can't see them. So it's still selected, but we can't see it. It's easy to work with. And I'm just going to go to Filter, Sharpen. Easy, it says. Unsharp mask. And I'm going to whack 500 on to start with. So if I look at that preview, can you see that? Look at round his eyes. Look how soft they were. Look how they're not now. Now look at his beard and his suit. Look how soft it is. Look how it's not soft now. Soft, sharp. 500's probably a bit much, so I'm going to go with 300. Again, you can see that's nice. Click OK. Zoom out. Fit the screen. Job done. So it's taken me 10 minutes to show you how to do that. But that would have taken me in the edit now probably 30 seconds. Maybe a minute if I was drinking my tea. So at this point, we're going to stop and think, right, what benefit would I have gained at this point from a RAW file? So what could I have done differently on a RAW file? Well, apart from using a different means to adjust the colour, which was off, and a different means to adjust the exposure, which was a bit under, what else could I do with that RAW file that I can't do with JPEG? Well, I could say I might bring some more detail out. Let's say in the RAW file, if I had it, I'd want to bring a bit more detail out where the shadows are. I don't, because it's actually quite nice as it is, but could I do that if I wanted to do that? I could. But I don't want to in this instance because I was in a studio. I was only a year into photography. I was in my studio using a shitty camera with a shitty lens with some second-hand multi-blitz lights, they were called. Working with a big softbox that I got off eBay for about 30 quid. Doing my best. Working with some great people to help me. Learning from others. Learning from watching then DVDs and going to seminars. Picking brains and doing everything I could to become the best photographer that I could be. The magenta in the shot here that you can see up here is just Lloyd's skin tones. So I don't want to pull any out, but if I wanted to, I have another process. And again, it's all about using masks and about using Savvy. So this time I'm going to use curves. And if you haven't seen this tutorial before, I'm going to show you something about curves. Always use curves off the layers palette and always use an extra layer so it's not destroying the layer that you've worked on. So out of the crate, curves come set a display option to light like that. And what you see normal people is they'll go, oh, I'm going to pinch that a bit there. I'm going to pinch that up a little bit there. And I'm going to go. And they go, oh, wow, that's brilliant. Save it, send it off to client. Come back, client says, oh, I like that, but can I just have it 5%? Yeah, let's go 5% less bright. So let's imagine you've saved this PSD file like this, and you can just open that back up, and you can go, right, what the fuck's 5%? Is it that? Is it that? Is it that? What's 5%? Oh shit. And that's normally how inexperienced photographers or photography know-alls that think they know it all would work. And also, if you notice, whenever you do this, all that good work you've done on the histogram goes to shit. Colours are going all over. Look, loads of mismatched colour. The suit's a different colour. Even the skin's a different colour because we didn't really know what we were doing. So before we start doing any edit here, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick up curve display options, and we're going to go on to pigment ink. Simple as that. Click OK, and now I'm just going to delete that because I don't need it for this point. And now when we come back to use the curves, we can do exact percentages, little percentages. Before we're going to do that, we're going to load in something called luminosity, and what that does is it protects both extremes of light and dark. So the first measure we change will be highlights only, and it will only affect highlights. The second measure we change will only affect shadows, and that gives us ultimate control over our contrast, our exposure, down to micro adjustments, because we're not wanging things about and hoping for the best. All right. So we're going to load in the luminosity just by holding down the control key again. So on the channels there, see how that little hand turns into a square. Click on RGB. We've now loaded in the luminosity. We're now going to hit the curves, and we're going to click right in the bang in the center. If you don't get bang center, don't worry, because you can click in these boxes and adjust it with up and down keys there. And we're only going to use the output, and for the output we're going to bring it down. So if you hit shift on your keyboard and the arrow down key, it gives you 10%. Look, see that? You can go as far as you want. Obviously we're not going to go that far. So let's just go for this one, 10%, and you can see if I move that out of the way, we've got 10% increase in brightness. See that? But if you look at it closely, not affected the shadows, only the highlights. Yeah? Okay, so we've made our highlight adjuster fine tune. We can do it 1%, 100%, whatever we want. It's only affecting highlights. So we can now do that with the shadows. We need to make a copy of that and invert it so it reverses the luminosity. So you do Control J, Control I. You see then it's made a negative of that. And all we do is double click and open it up again. Click where we were, go to output, but this time come back the other way. And I'm just going to do arrow down to 55 using 1%. So if I switch those off, that's the original. That's a fine tune. See the shift? But maybe you wanted more contrast, maybe you wanted a bit more of whatever it is. So instead of doing it at the raw stage and then be stuck with it when we convert it to a JPEG, I'm doing it at this stage so I can fine tune it and not doing the job twice. Does that make sense? Alright, so if I'm being ultra picky, I would say at this point Lloyd's face is probably a little bit too hot for me, so I would click in the highlights there, B for paintbrush, drop the opacity down here to 50%, and I would just maybe brush the highlight off his face a little bit like that, little fine tune. If you can't remember where you've brushed either, if you press backslash on the keyboard, look, it tells you where your mask is. And that's it. Job's done for me. Nice shadows, nice highlight, nice contrast. Again, to flatten it, Control Shift E flattens it. File, save as. I've probably already got a copy of this, so I'll call it copy A. Like that. Job's done. And it took me 10, 15 minutes to talk you through that, going quite slowly, but in reality, once you've done it a few times, a couple of minutes per picture, then you've bypassed the whole raw stage. You've not wanged anything about, you've controlled everything. If you save the layers as a PSD file as you're going along, if the client comes back and says, can I have that 5% brighter shot, whatever it is, you can go back and do it, because I've just shown you how to do it in percentages rather than wanging and hoping. It's all about control, all about non-destructive editing, all about you getting the best out of the picture you've got in camera, in this case a JPEG. What we'll do next is I'll show you a more recent picture of mine which is shot in RAW, and I'll go through my stages and we'll maybe do a little bit of extra tweaking just to show you what you can do in RAW file, and then we can look and compare the two pictures. But really, you know, if this was shot on a R5 or an R6 with an L series lens, the sharpness will be better. But other than that, there's not much that I could do better at this stage with that shot 20 years on with the experience I've got. I would light it the same, I would edit it the same, I'm looking for the same issues, sharpness, colour balance, but I don't need to shoot RAW because I can do it that way. There are some times, which we'll discuss in a bit, where RAW is, I don't know if better is the right word, but more suited to what you're doing. But in a controlled environment where you're controlling everything, you're just giving yourself another job for me. Alright? Okay, let's have a look for a more recent file. 2025. Can't even find my folders here. Who we got? Let's have a look at Live. Let's have a look at an edit of Live. Alright, so which ones did I do? Live edits. Large icons. What was that one? Alright, we'll use that one because she's smiling. So let's find the JPEG because I tend to still shoot JPEGs. Because I can. In fact, let's go for one that's a little bit more like what Bit of Lloyd. That one will do. Alright, so we're going to look at this JPEG of Olivia. So again, you can see much more modern camera, Canon R6 L series 24-105 lens. Color balance to this time set to, what is it, 50 200k, 50, I can never remember. Daylight. And the Bowens lights I'm using, daylight, but we're still a mile off. Okay, I've underexposed like I always do, because I like to be able to bring some stuff back. F11, 125th, ISO 100, lovely. None of this back and forwards with a grey card trying to get the colour right. None of this exposure meter trying to get it right. I instinctively know when I put my light on this power at this pace, that's what I'm going to get. So again, first thing I'm going to do is fix the colour. So photo filter. This time we're going to put some red in because we've got blue. Alright. Or cyan. So we'll punch that up. We tend to get a bit of magenta comes in when we do this one. So let's have a look. There we go. Got loads of magenta now, which we don't want. So what we do now is we add another filter. Opposite of magenta is green. Take that all off, start 1% and just push that up until we've just got a few slithers. There we go. Just about there. Skin colour up at the top and at this side. Not worried about that. So again, exactly the same process. Couple of photo filters. The mist colour's gone. We switch those off and look at the screen. You can see the histogram and you can see the actual background on the shot. Okay. Next pitch. Levels. There we go. Again, now I said to you, I tend to pinch the shadows 5%. This time I don't have to. We've got the shadows are all there, so I don't have to worry about that. Could drag the slider across to the start of the info there. Yeah. Now even at that, I think her shoulder and her head are a little bit hot. A little bit too hot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push that right to the start of that info there. And then I'm just going to zoom in. Click in there into the mask. Paintbrush tool. Set to black. And I'm just going to... Ooh, not that much. I'm just going to feather it down to 20%. That might even be too much. Might be. And just bring that back because I don't like blown highlights. Let's have a look. There we go. Good to go. Alright, and I know this might have been a test shot because I've chopped the feet off, so we'll let that one go. But this has got two lights. Big light to the left as we're looking at it in a reflector bouncing it back from that side. Lloyd just had the one big light and a nice wall shadow. But again, same process. I'm going to sharpen it because even though I shot on an L series lens, I know sometimes they're a little bit off. So again, I'm going to make a red copy. Control and I to invert it. I'm going to then pinch the amount of black and white on there by going to levels up there and really only want to sharpen the white bits. Click OK. Control, click on the red copy to load that mask in. Yeah. Click on RGB so I can see her. Turn the extras off so I don't see that marching ants rubbish. Go up to filter. In fact, let's Let's zoom in a bit so we can see the effect. Filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, 300%. See that if I click it off, you can see a hair becoming sharp. Yeah, probably a bit too much. So I'm going to try 200% on this one I live. That's better. Her eyes a little sharper, her eyelashes, whites of her eyes. Good to go. Job's done. Bit on screen. Okay, now, so if I decide, or wish I'd shot in RAW, and I can punch a bit of this back up again, I'll just click on the same as before. RGB, load the luminosity in, curves, add some curves in here, make sure your inputs are 0, 50, sorry. Click in there, add 10, 20, 30. This is a bit too much, I know. Control and I to invert it. Oh, that didn't work, did it? We'll do that one. Control and J to copy it, Control and I to invert it. Double click in there. Go back down for the shadows. Start from 50, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And again, we've probably overexposed her head and her eye a little bit, so I could go back in there and brush those out again. Like so. Switch those off, depends what you're trying to do. Probably a bit bright for me. So at this point, if I decide it's too bright, I can either double click in there and drop that brightness down like that, or I could just go to the opacity on that layer and drop it down like that. Yeah, done. Job done. So again, here I am in 20 years on from the Lloyd picture, still controlling everything, still in control of everything, still doing everything the same way, no different, no approach different, everything's the same. You might think, oh well, Liv's outfit could do with punching out a little bit. All right, let's just see if we did punch it out a little bit. Let's see what it did. Do you want to see that much? Not sure you do. I mean, just obviously I'm over egging this. Kind of quite like it like that. I think you can see enough of the outfit and the dress, and it's black. It's supposed to be dark, but you could if you wanted to mask it and bring that in, but I don't want to. It's not my bag. The only thing I might do from here is a little bit of skin retouching, but minimal. Job's done. If I was to look at the RAW file of that, don't know what it is because I renamed them when I renamed them. I bet I can't find it either. My eyes are shit, people. My eyes are shit. I don't even know where it might be. One of the early ones, isn't it? Or is it? It's one of the early ones. I chopped the legs off, didn't I? That one is it. We'll go with that one. We'll look at the RAW file list. Like I said, I shoot in RAW and JPEG, depending on what. Well, I always shoot RAW and JPEG anyway, just in case there's any kind of like things go wrong. Oh, we've not cut a feet off on this one, so we use this one. But again, if I'm going to do this edit in the RAW file, colours off. All right, so let's go with this. Let's see what this picks. Bing, da bang. Colour done. Don't mind those little bits. That's just skin colour. All right, we can adjust the exposure here, but don't forget, once we adjust this, we're stuck with it. Do we want to do that here? Maybe, maybe not. We can get rid of the highlights, or we can bring the highlights up, depending on what we want to do. Again, you're stuck with them once you've done it. Shadows are the same, whites are the same. Looks a bit milky and a bit drab, that, but I mean, we could say, all right, I want to see more of the dress. All right, let's pull that up then. But look what it's done to her skin tone. Yeah? Oh. All right, let's go for 50% on that. Let's just pretend we wanted more of that. But anything else I do here, I'm stuck with it at the next phase. All right? So I'm not doing that. I'm just going to click open, make a JPEG, and then I'm just going to do levels like so. And again, because I know it's blown out, some of those, doing this roughly, quickly. That's it. So on this occasion, I didn't do anything else at the RAW stage that I would have done at the JPEG stage. So although I like to shoot RAW, so I've got scope in case of accidents or in case of creative choices change or any of that kind of stuff, all I need is the JPEG because I know instinctively what to do at the edit stage. And in these instances, JPEG's always good enough. And if you're controlling the scenario you're in, whether you're inside, outside, upstairs, downstairs, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, if you can control everything, every element of that shot, JPEG's good enough for you. Now I know people will say, "Oh yeah, but RAW's got more of this." RAW's, it hasn't. It's the same picture. It's got more adjustability, but the image size, the physical image size, is the same as what the RAW file is. And I used to demonstrate this to students by picking up a piece of white A4 paper with nothing on it, and then an A4 paper with a lot of scribble on it. I'd say, "What's the difference?" And they'd say, "That one's got scribble on it." And I'd say, "No, that one's got more information in it. The same size, shape, and everything. It's just that the RAW file's got more info in it." But that info is only any good to you if you know what to do with it or what you want it for. If you're just shooting in RAW because everybody says RAW's best, RAW's bigger, then you're just an idiot, frankly. You're making yourself work that you don't need to have. You're giving yourself too many options. Probably when you come to the edit, you're thinking about it too much, you're doing too much, you just like end up with nothing because you've tried wanging everything around to try and get to what you think you wanted because you've shot RAW. The only time for me that RAW is kind of essential is when you've got elements that you can't control or that you need to bring in the edit because a JPEG won't cut it. And that for me would be situations like, probably for me, street photography, because you're out in the street, you've got rough settings for each shot. Sun goes in, sun comes out, it rains, person you're photographing steps behind something, causes shadow. All that stuff going on. So RAW for me when I'm shooting street. If I'm shooting landscapes or skyscapes or night stuff, RAW, because cameras will only see one thing well. Wherever you're set to, f1.8 up to f6000, it'll only see what you tell it to see. And if in that range of sight doesn't, it can't give you what you want, then I would shoot RAW to be able to bring that in by adjusting certain things in line with what I know I want to do, not just to wang things around because I think it'll look good if I wang shit around. So for me, it's not what's better. There's no better. There is what do you need it for. So the argument shouldn't be RAW versus JPEG, which is better. It should be RAW and JPEG, which one are you using today and why. And you can probably put TIFF into that as well, because some people shoot TIFFs and edit TIFFs, which is great. And there's all sorts of other kind of RAW files now, aren't they? Fucking CR 3.2s and all sorts of shit. But let's just go RAW versus JPEG. RAW is an unprocessed image, all the image data that your camera can capture. JPEG is a rough estimation of what your camera settings were and what you told it to do. Whichever one you use, you've always got something to add to it because cameras are just not that good. All right? Just remember that. Now, you might think, "Oh, it's straight off camera, I'm a purist, I don't need to edit it." Well, if that's the line you want to take, you want to go down that path, great, but your pictures will show that. And you can tell yourself in your own mind that your pictures are great straight off the camera, but the only person you're kidding is yourself. Trust me, I'm a professional. All right, so next I'm just going to show you when a RAW file is more useful. And let me see if I can find one. I don't know, have I got one on here? Have I got one on here? Might have to dig into archive. Just go make yourselves a cup of tea while I dig into this hard drive and find a RAW file. Trying to find maybe a sky picture. So I guess we could have a look at one of these. This was on a Canon 5DS 213 in Liverpool a few years ago. Fans just come on my laptop, so I'm sorry if you can hear that. I'll try and edit it out if it's too annoying. Shouldn't be too bad. Let me close those down so it takes a bit less pressure off the old lappy. Alright, so again, that's a JPEG, not a RAW file. Pillock. Why does it say RAW when they're not? 213. Oh. Come on, give me some raw. CW213 raw. Maybe I've moved that file somewhere else, because I do that sometimes. Because I'm a pillock. 213 233. That's fucking annoying. But you're all sitting, aren't you? Going, can see it there once, it's there. Go with 212. I know it's not the same shot, but it's close enough in it. So, in these instances, shooting raw, because it's a very strange day and we've got stuff in the distance in fog, stuff close by in fog, quite dreary, quite wet, quite miserable, and trying to capture what I saw, but I know the kind of like the undertone, the shadows and the midtones on a JPEG will not quite cut it for me, because I've got to expose to be able to see this in the background, otherwise it's a bit pointless. Yeah, so I'm not just exposing for Kirsty, my wife here, and this dude, whoever he is. I'm looking at the whole picture and trying to get, I guess they might call it an average, so later I can come back and put what I want where. And again, shot, I'm hoping that I had it on cloudy, but perhaps not, I can't remember. But our shot, you can see we've got a bit of blue in the raw file there. So again, we can use the colour picker and try and get it to fix it for us, which it pretty much has. It's put a little bit of cyan in there, is it? Not cyan, bit of green and yellow. Can pinch that off a bit, like that, maybe. The sun would be warmer than not. That's not bad. There's a little bit in there. That red could be to do with that sign there. But that's not bad. It's better than it was. Yeah. But then, what am I going to do? I mean, let's go. What kind of picture do you want to make? Yeah? What kind of picture do you want to make? It's all about what you want to do. And I'm wanging sliders on it on purpose. But there, we've got a postcard picture, haven't we? We've got a nice postcard of that day. I'll crop that guy out of the picture, but nice day in Liverpool. My wife down on the docks there, looking out. Can't grim it is, but it looks relatively nice because she can now see her, which was not what I wanted to do. So I press Alt. See how it resets cancel to reset. You can go back to where you were, but then you've got to do the colour balance again. We'll just do that again quickly. Can't even remember what I did. Doing it quick. Yeah, that'll do. I wanted a real moody, kind of almost ghostly kind of feel, and you can do that a couple of ways with the exposure. And I don't use the contrast button because you can see it doesn't really help you much at all. What I've discovered is using highlights, shadows, blacks, whites and exposure is the way to kind of get the best out of your raw file. So you can put the highlights up, sorry, the shadows up a little bit. What that allows you to do is maintain some detail in the shadows whilst I'm underexposing even more than I did in the shot, to try and give it a bit of a ghostly kind of feeling. Now highlights are important here because where the highlights sit across the fence on the highlights from the rain, if we take those off, it dulls and deadens the picture. So you can whack them all across like that, look, to get your contrast back. But again, don't forget this stage, you're stuck with it. So I might go 60% contrast there. Whites, you'll see if we drag them off, can make a massive difference to highlights. But I don't want to be stuck with anything, so I'm not going to touch them. And again, blacks will do the same thing, and it will also exacerbate the natural vignette off the lens, and I don't want to do that. So for this one, I'm going to underexpose by -70, highlights at 60, shadows at 20, just to give me a little bit of detail on a jacket in the light up here. Right, so pretty happy with that. Open that. Now, quite often when you make a conversion from RAW to JPEG, you lose a lot of information. In the transition, in the flattening, in how a JPEG is made from a RAW file is it takes out loads of lines of information. And sometimes it does that, it kills a lot of stuff you've done. On this it's not too bad. It's added a bit of blue in, which I'm not too worried about because it's in the picture, so it's in the sea, in the sky. There's no massive erroneous colours up here, but it has killed the exposure a little bit. So, but anyway, first thing I do is the same thing I did with the JPEG, up to levels, bring them across to there. Not bad at all, not bad at all. Probably a little bit too much here, but I'll fix that in a minute. So I want more shadow. So again, because I can do percents, I'm going to click in the 0 there in the layers. Arrow up key, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5%. If we just watch the shadows on that, the details there, but we've still got good contrast. Yeah. I'm not overly happy with that top exposure, so I'm gonna bring it right to the edge. There, that's telling us we're like perfectly exposed now. If you look at this histogram, that's telling us that we're exposed. But I don't want that. I want my version of the picture, which I shot. So I'm going to back that off. Oh, wrong way. I'm going to back that off 20%, like that, because I think that's a little bit more calm. Before, particularly up in the sky here, it was a bit too bright, a bit too, and on the day it didn't feel bright at all. It felt quite murky and quite, the sun was clearly over that way. Up here, you can see the highlight. So I wanted to be able to see the buildings across the way, but I didn't want them to be obvious. And I think, again, if I go back to that and add that 20% back in, I think it all just becomes a bit too nice, I think is the word. I'll go back 20%, it's a bit closer to where I originally wanted it. I might even, on a different day in a different mood, use the brush tool in the mask and just see how that looked, because I think that's probably more like how it actually was than what it's given me, and maybe even a little bit more contrast down here. So again, you can use the paintbrush tool. This time I'm just going to put opacity at 30%, and you can take out a little bit of that as well. Not massive, but hey ho. So there we go, and pretty much done. Might make a black and white conversion, but that's a session for another day. So for me, it is about control. It's about being able to shoot, realize what you're shooting, have the skills and the tools to make the edits that you know you want for your thing, run through processes, do them well, do them once, because so many people spend hours on Photoshop, and my kind of endeavour as a teacher of photography is to try and get people to embrace Photoshop, not Lightroom, Photoshop. Reasons for that: you'll contain yourself on a picture at a time, and you'll get into understanding how vital it is for your pictures to have individual care taken. Whereas Lightroom tends to be more batchy, do them all, which is great sometimes, but I think when you're making art, when you're making one-offs, when you're making good work, you should hone in on it. And that's why I use Photoshop, not Lightroom. Plus, I think some of the tools and the engine's a bit better on Photoshop than Lightroom. Personal opinion. But I want people to embrace it, and I hear so many stories that people give up on Photoshop because they think they're going to spend hours and hours and hours editing. If you can get yourself a bunch of processes that work for you, whether you follow my instruction and then adapt it to yourself, whether you pick bits out of my instruction, or whether you're looking at somebody else's instruction, doesn't matter. What matters is you get a process that enables your pictures to come off the camera and be finished to a quality that you can repeat. That's what it's all about. And the more you do it, the better you'll get at it, the more you'll want to do it, because it's easier than you thought it was going to be. It's not arduous. You're not pulling your hair out because you've been there for an hour, one picture, and you still haven't got it where you want it to be. It shouldn't be like that. It might be like that a little bit in the beginning. Even if you follow what I've done today, second time, third time, did it a bit quicker. Slow it down, replay it, figure it out, do it on your pictures. The more you do it, the easier it gets, the more it makes sense. But coming back to the original point of today's video, or podcast rather, RAW versus JPEG, which is best? And the truth is, neither are best. They both have function, they both have causes, they both have uses. some people might say, yeah, but quality on a RAW file. No. For what you're doing, what you're putting out, the work you're likely to publish, where it's likely to be published, you could shoot JPEG for the rest of your life and nobody would know if you follow process. RAW files are for people with a bit more experience, a bit more savvy, and know what they want to fine-tune, tweak at the end. But whether you convert that to then a JPEG or to a TIFF, you're pretty much stuck with what you do there. And you can't undo it without going back to it. So why do it? Do a minimal RAW edit and then fix it in the JPEG or TIFF stage, because you can then really work on it and you can use layers and you can use fine-tuning and you don't have to undo, delete, you don't have to start again. You can just fine-tune, move, remove. Loads of that kind of stuff you can do with a JPEG. If you're retouching skin and all that, you've got to have a JPEG file or some kind of image file that's not a RAW file anyway. So you're nearly always converting from RAW to JPEG. So if you can control everything in your shoot, if you can control it to a degree where you know you don't have to go back and reprocess things, shoot RAW on JPEG. Always shoot a RAW in case you need it. But more often than not, you should be able to. But more often than not, you should be able to just use a JPEG. Get yourself a process. Get yourself, in a position where editing is fun, because you're just finishing off that thing you did in the camera, and you won't go far wrong. So anyway, that's it from me today, folks. Hope you enjoyed that pretty quick whistle-stop tour on RAW versus JPEG, or JPEG versus RAW, or whatever it is. We've now decided there's no better. There is just use and need and function. And if you can understand that, you're not going very far wrong. So thanks for listening if you stayed this far. If you wouldn't mind, like, subscribe and all that other stuff to keep the channel kind of up there, fighting that algorithm, getting the word out. I would really appreciate that. Thank you for your time, attention. If you have any questions, drop them below in the comments or ping me an email or whatever you want. I'll try and respond to you. I am about to record a full series of editing from start to finish. Shoot, edit, publish. That's coming up soon. It's not going to be a podcast, but it's going to be on the channel as another thing, a tutorial. So look out for that coming up soon. But other than that, thanks for listening. Have a great afternoon, evening, weekend, whatever you're doing. And I'll see you on the flip side. Cheers, guys.
To get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind. Think about a way to get you out my mind. You won't believe, yeah, I can't get you out my life, no.